Hi and welcome back to my channel. Today we're actually gonna keep watching the Napoleonic War series from Epic History TV. They have their new video, or I don't know how new it is, but it's about the Battle of Eylau, 1807. So I think it's after a couple of months after Battle of Jena. So Napoleon is pursuing the Russians and some Prussians into East Prussia. And almost into Russia, right? So I guess that's the context. I thought we saw some glimpse of it when we were talking about East Prussia. But okay, original videos down below. Let's go.
Of campaigning had exhausted even his toughest veterans. Most had not seen France in years, and the war in Poland seemed to offer only freezing mud, hunger, and a stubborn enemy who did not know when he was beaten.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. An enemy who doesn't know when it's beaten. I mean, that sounds like Russia. That also sounds like Romans, right? The Romans during the Punic Wars, right? But I mean, yeah, if you take the climate of Eastern Europe, especially like Poland, East Prussia, Russia, and contrast that to France, yeah, that would be very different to live. And they haven't been, like you said, in France in years. Not a couple of months, years. Maybe new conscripts or whatever at this time maybe were in France a couple of months ago, but still. Think about that. Think about you haven't been in your home country for years because of war. Wow.
At Poltusk, the Russians had fought courageously and thwarted Napoleon's first attempt to outmaneuver their army.
Okay.
But another opportunity would soon emerge. Command of the Russian army had recently passed to General Levin August von Bennigsen. Despite his German name and Hanoverian roots, he was a veteran of 34 years' service with the Imperial Russian Army. On the 27th of January, with 77,000 Russians and 13,000 Prussians, Bennigsen launched a surprise winter offensive, targeting Marshal Ney's exposed 6th Corps. But Ney escaped, and Bernadotte's 1st Corps fought a successful rearguard action at Moringen.
Okay.
Now Napoleon would turn the tables on Bennigsen. As soon as he'd learned of the Russian advance, he'd begun planning a grand encirclement of the enemy.
Uh-oh. Yeah, because I mean, yeah, Bennigsen is going south. I think we talked about this in the last video. I don't know which battle it was, but yeah. Yeah, Bennigsen is going down south, chasing the 1st Corps, and then Napoleon's just gonna come and strike on Bennigsen's left flank. Okay. Okay.
Suddenly, it was the Russians who were exposed.
Yeah.
But Bennigsen got wind of Napoleon's trap just in time and began a hurried withdrawal. 5 days of relentless marching followed, with Marshal Murat's vanguard nipping at the Russians' heels all the way. But despite a series of furious assaults on their rearguard, ably commanded by Prince Bagration, the French could not break through.
Okay. And we heard about Bagration in Napoleon's invasion of Russia, right? Okay.
The pursuit continued, even as temperatures plummeted.
Yeah.
To the north, Ney shadowed Lestocq's Prussian Corps, while Soult's 4th Corps followed the Russian rearguard to the small East Prussian town of Eylau.
It's a small town as well. Uh-oh. Wow. Oh, right. I think I remember Eylau. Eylau is that major cavalry battle, I think. I mean, you can see on this image if this is Eylau, right? Of course, you see infantry, but you see a lot of cavalry. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
On the afternoon of the 7th of February,
Wait, let's just look at the Russians' position here. Of course, we see that it's winter, obviously. We see they have some forward defenses there, right? Some cavalry, some cannon on a cemetery knoll. Okay. They have a lot of cavalry, actually. The Russians. They are... I don't know if they're in the best position. It looks like it. It looks like an open terrain. Looks like there's no river. Some roads, some forest, but not where the Russians are facing the French. It looks like a very good opportunity to use cavalry on both sides. Napoleon has these lakes here, or whatever they are, right?
Marshal Soult's troops advanced up the icy road to Eylau. They found it held by General Barclay de Tolly's Russian division,
and we heard about him as
along
well.
a line of fences, ditches, and barricades. Just before dusk, confused combat began around the town's cemetery.
Oh, it's a town. Okay.
More and more troops were sucked into the bitter fighting.
Okay.
The French took the cemetery with a bayonet charge.
Think about being there. Oh my. Imagine this, you're battling on a literal cemetery and hiding behind stone, like, wow. Yeah, it's brutal fighting. It's in the winter. Brutal fighting.
But then had to hold it against a determined Russian counterattack, led by Barclay himself, who was seriously wounded by grape shot.
Wow, grape shot.
Vicious street fighting continued well into the night. But the French ultimately prevailed, with the loss of 4,000 casualties on each side.
Whoa. What?
Soldiers and officers alike were astonished by the savagery of the engagement.
Yeah.
As darkness fell, temperatures dropped dramatically. Many of the wounded froze to death where they had fallen.
Wow.
The French ransacked Eylau for food and firewood. Many Russian soldiers had to sleep in open fields, wrapped only in their greatcoats, forbidden to light fires.
I mean, of course, there's a strategic benefit of not lighting fires so the enemy can't see where you are, but then again, your soldiers are going to freeze to death. And I know on this map we can see that the Russians doesn't have that much forest. They have some forest, but they don't have that much firewood, like he said. And I don't know, on this map it looks like they're sleeping in the position that they are. Maybe not exactly how it looked, but it tells me that they slept basically in the position that they are going to then later be in when morning comes. Very brutal. Very brutal.
That night, Napoleon's greatest concern was that the Russians would slip away under cover of darkness, robbing him of the decisive battle he craved. He need not have worried. Bennigsen was done running. Here at Eylau, the Russians would make their stand.
Okay, second day. Now the real fighting is beginning. 4,000 on each side. Wow. It was a vast hurricane of death that seemed to smash and erase from the face of the earth everything in its path. Wow. Lifeguard hussars. Okay.
Before dawn, Napoleon was on Eylau's cemetery knoll, trying to make out the Russian lines through his telescope.
Makes sense.
He was surprised by what he saw. 67,000 Russians packed into 2 great lines along a 3-mile front, with well-defended villages anchoring both flanks. Open ground lay between the 2 armies, providing a clear field of fire for Bennigsen's 400 guns, a huge amount of artillery for an army of the age.
Yep, 400.
Napoleon had Soult and Augereau's depleted corps, plus the Imperial Guard and Murat's reserve cavalry, just 45,000 men and 137 guns.
Okay, Napoleon's outnumbered.
But Napoleon was expecting Davout's Third Corps, 15,000 men, to arrive at any moment, in perfect position to fall on the Russian flank.
Okay.
At dawn, as French troops were still getting into position, hundreds of Russian guns opened a massive bombardment. In Eylau, there was chaos, as round shot crashed through buildings and tore through men.
Yep.
French guns soon answered the Russians in kind. It was the largest combined artillery bombardment the world had yet seen. It lasted nearly 3 hours.
Oh my. Wow.
While Bennigsen had quantity, French crews were more experienced, and against the densely packed Russian lines, they couldn't miss.
Exactly. Uh-oh.
Meanwhile, Davout's 2 leading divisions arrived on the battlefield, dangerously placed on the Russian left flank.
Yeah.
But before they could attack, Prince Galitzin struck first with his cavalry brigade.
Okay, makes sense.
Davout's veterans threw back the horsemen with disciplined fire. Galitzin's charge, however, bought time for General Bagavout to reorganize his defensive line to face the new threat. When the Iron Marshal attacked around 8 AM, he found the enemy entrenched on a ridge with formidable artillery support. Davout's lead division was mauled, suffering 1,500 casualties as it was thrown back. This check on Davout alarmed Napoleon. He feared the Russians might withdraw before his trap could close. It was, he decided, the battle's critical moment. Orders flew out to Marshal Augereau's 7th Corps and General Saint-Hilaire's division. They were to launch a frontal attack against the enemy. At all costs, the Russians' escape must be prevented.
Okay, so that makes sense. Napoleon wants to do a frontal charge against sort of the center, right? To chase he would think the Russians fleeing, right? But Bennigsen isn't retreating, he's making his stand. So this could bode very badly for Napoleon, right? I mean, this could be like Waterloo, right? Okay, let's see what's gonna happen. All was disorder, confusion, stupor under an avalanche of blows. Okay.
The 49-year-old Marshal Augereau had been with Napoleon since his first command in Italy and the brilliant campaign of '96. But
one thing about that though, I saw the Epic History TV did a series on Napoleon's offensive or campaign in Italy. I think I'm gonna react to that. Okay.
He was deeply unwell that morning.
Uh-oh.
At 10 AM, strapped to his horse, he led forward the 12,000 troops of
strapped
7th
to his
Corps,
horse? What?
just as heavy snow began to fall.
Uh-oh.
With visibility down to a few feet, Augereau's divisions drifted off course, straight into the murderous artillery duel.
Oh my.
French and Russian cannonballs tore through their ranks,
Wow.
Oursel's men pushed on doggedly.
I thought they were just going in. Obviously, it's snowing, but I thought they were going and maybe get slaughtered and slaughter Russians in the center or center left of the Russians. I didn't know they were going into the cannon duel and then pushing on. Wow. Wow.
But as they neared the Russian line, the blizzard suddenly lifted.
Uh-oh.
One division found itself facing 70 Russian guns
Oh
at a
my.
range of just 30 yards. Seconds later, its forward ranks were obliterated by Russian canister.
Wow.
Another French division broke through the enemy line,
Okay.
only to be surrounded on 3 sides by Russian bayonets. And
one thing though that this could have done, it could have scared the Russians though. Right, this snowstorm and blizzard could have scared the Russians in thinking that Napoleon has just advanced on his entire position, or his right flank, sort of. But at this moment, it doesn't look like it's going well for the 7th Corps and Augereau. Okay.
annihilated.
Yeah.
Augereau's horse was killed under him, leaving him badly injured.
Yeah, he's strapped to it.
As the survivors of his corps stumbled back the way they'd come, Russian cavalry and infantry surged forward.
Wow. Why is Napoleon
Units
doing
were
it?
overrun. Entire regiments swallowed up.
Yep.
Order and discipline collapsed.
Yep. So is Napoleon even gonna win the Battle of Eylau? This, and almost an entire corps, a mini army, has gone out of action. Killed, wounded, captured. Or stuck in square formation and just waiting for cannon to shoot them, right? Wow. How is this gonna go? Is Napoleon even gonna win?
One of the few units to maintain order was the 14th Infantry, nicknamed the Brave for its heroic role at Rivoli 10 years before.
Okay.
But now
I have to see this. Now I have to see Napoleon's campaign in Italy. Because 10 years ago, 1807, he's 10 years before is 1797. And that's Napoleon's campaign in Italy. So I have to watch that series. Okay.
they were outnumbered and surrounded.
Yep.
The regiment resisted bravely, but was cut to pieces, suffering 75% casualties and the loss of its Eagle standard.
Wow. 75.
In the space of just 30 minutes, the Russians...
Imagine this. We can't imagine how it is walking in a snowstorm to work or from work or to school or from school or to a grocery store or from the grocery store, right? Like, we can imagine that. But imagine, you can't imagine walking in a snowstorm / blizzard while being under fire, while you may be also firing, while cannon fire is being shot at you and you're going through that, and then pushing on, fighting infantry, and then infantry and cavalry surrounding you and destroying you. Wow. This is brutal.
Inflicted 5,000 casualties on Augereau's 7th Corps. Effectively, it had ceased to exist.
Yeah, exactly. It's just gone.
It was one of the worst battlefield disasters of the Napoleonic Wars.
Wow.
For the French, Eylau was no longer a fight for victory, but a struggle for survival.
Yep. Are you going to let those fellows devour us? Uh-oh. No, now a cavalry charge is coming. Uh-oh.
From Eylau's cemetery knoll, Napoleon watched the catastrophe engulfing Augereau's corps.
Yep.
He knew he must stabilize the situation immediately and buy time to reorganize his center and for Davout's corps to arrive in force.
Yep. And a cavalry charge usually gets that done, right?
So the Emperor turned to Murat and his large cavalry reserve. It was a desperate gamble.
Yep.
The horses were tired and suffering from the cold.
Yeah, and the men
They'd
too.
be outnumbered and unsupported by infantry.
Wow.
But the flamboyant, apparently fearless Marshal Murat was undaunted. He assembled 40 squadrons of cavalry, 5,000 dragoons and cuirassiers, and led them forward.
Wow.
So began one of the legendary cavalry charges of the Napoleonic Wars.
Wow.
Unable to move much faster than a walk due to the terrible conditions, Murat's cavalry nevertheless presented a formidable wall of men, horses and steel.
Obviously, yeah. Uh-oh.
General Grouchy's dragoons, in the lead, drove back the advancing Russians.
Wow.
D'Hautpoul's steel-clad cuirassiers then thundered forward on their giant horses.
Yeah.
Finding a gap between two Russian divisions, they used it to pry open the enemy line.
Wow. This is what a good cavalry charge could have done up until the First World War. Right? This is what it could done, or could do. Right? Just a good cavalry charge, just straight into the center of the enemy, and you probably haven't maybe won the battle, but they have given you breathing space for your infantry and cannon to do something as well.
With seemingly unstoppable momentum, the riders surged forward. But it could not last.
Nope.
As they neared Bennigsen's headquarters, a Russian battery blasted the French horsemen with canister.
Wow. Brutal.
D'Hautpoul himself was mortally wounded.
Wow.
French momentum was lost.
Yep.
As the Russian counterattack began, Murat ordered his squadrons to regroup and pull back.
That's going to be difficult.
He almost didn't make it.
Wow.
The Russian 4th Division had moved to block his escape. Seeing this, Napoleon ordered Marshal Bessières to lead forward the Guard cavalry.
Makes sense.
These were 2,000 of the finest cavalry in Europe.
Yeah.
And to cheers of Vive l'Empereur, they advanced into the whirling mass of shot and snow.
Wow.
When Colonel Lepic saw his men ducking, he called out, "Heads up, by God! Those are bullets, not turds."
Wow. Epic.
Chasseurs of the Guard charged down the first Russian infantry square they met, scattered the enemy's gunners, and cut out a path for Murat's retreating squadrons.
Wow.
The French charge at Eylau would go down as one of the boldest, most desperate military maneuvers of the age.
Yep.
The losses were terrible in men and horses, but it succeeded in its mission. The Russian advance had been stopped in its tracks.
Okay.
And the initiative had swung back to Napoleon.
Yeah. All attention on both sides was now riveted on Davout and our left wing. The situation did not appear very rosy. Okay.
Marshal Davout's 3rd Corps, the famed heroes of Auerstedt 4 months before, had now arrived in sufficient force to launch a full-scale assault.
Okay.
Anticipating this, Bagavout withdrew to a new defensive line on the Kriegerberge, a dominating height perfect for artillery.
That makes sense.
2 hours of chaotic fighting followed, with every French advance challenged by a fierce Russian counterattack.
Wow.
But supported by dragoons and Saint-Hilaire's division, 3rd Corps slowly ground down the enemy.
Okay.
Bennigsen was forced to send in his last reserve, Kaminsky's 14th Division. Supported by cavalry, it drove the French from Klein-Sausgarten and across the fields beyond until its own advance was checked by French artillery.
Okay. It's a slugging match.
When Davout resumed his attack at 3 p.m., the Russian line buckled.
Okay.
The Kriegerberge was taken.
Wow.
So too Bennigsen's headquarters at Auklappen.
Wow.
Bennigsen scraped together enough units to improvise a new defensive line.
Okay.
But French guns, hauled up to the Kriegerberger, opened up a devastating fire.
Wow.
The French pressure was irresistible. The Russian flank would surely collapse at any moment, handing Napoleon the decisive victory he so desperately sought.
Uh-oh.
All that was required was one final push.
But why can't Napoleon attack? Good God, the Prussians are here too. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. That's not good.
Early that morning, Bennigsen had sent urgent orders to Prussian General Anton von Lestock to join...
One thing though, this is a very good, I don't know, good, but this is a very similar situation, not what happened at Waterloo, but Waterloo overall, right? Napoleon won a decisive victory at Waterloo. He had split the Brits and the Prussians. This is not exactly the same, but the Prussians is coming to the aid of Bennigsen. Right? Napoleon tried to go into center of Bennigsen army. He tried to do the same to the Brits at Waterloo. I mean, this is a very similar situation. Not exactly the same, but similar.
Join the main army with his corps as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
Although nearly 70, Lestock was still as energetic as he'd been serving under Frederick the Great.
Wow.
And was assisted by a highly capable chief of staff, Colonel Gerhard von Scharnhorst.
Okay.
Lestock's corps, 9,000 men, was 8 miles northwest of Eylau, closely watched by Marshal Ney's 6th Corps.
Okay.
His orders were to prevent the Prussians linking up with the Russians at all costs.
Makes sense.
But by force-marching his troops along frozen, hilly country roads, Lestock was able to bypass Ney's blocking force.
Wow.
To Bennigsen's joy, by early afternoon, the Prussians had reached Schmödeten. With his left flank crumbling, there was no time to lose.
Yep.
At 4 p.m., Lestock's Prussians charged forward.
Wow.
By now, Davout's men had been marching and fighting for many hours and were utterly spent. They managed a few ragged volleys before they turned and ran. Russian cavalry followed in pursuit.
Uh-oh.
Marshal Davout, with just one intact division left, prepared to make a stand on the Kriegerberger.
Makes sense.
The brave, he shouted, will find a glorious death here.
Wow.
Fortunately for Davout, the enemy's attacks were poorly coordinated, and his 40-gun battery inflicted terrible losses.
Yep.
Around 5:30, as dusk fell, Ney's corps arrived in pursuit of the Prussians and took Schlödeten. This new threat forced Bennigsen to call off his attack on Davout.
Yeah.
And as darkness descended, the day's slaughter finally came to an end.
Wow. No matter where one looked, one saw nothing but corpses, and beheld men dragging themselves over the ground. One heard nothing but heart-rending cries.
Since Napoleon had crowned himself emperor in 1804, every campaign, every battle he'd waged, had ended in brilliant success.
Yep, at this point, yes.
No longer.
Yep.
Bennigsen, learning the true scale of his army's losses and its critical shortage of ammunition, withdrew overnight.
Wow.
The French were left holding a frozen, corpse-strewn battlefield, allowing Napoleon to claim a victory.
Sure.
But in reality, Eylau had been a murderous slaughter,
Punic
without
victory.
a winner.
Yeah, punic victory.
As Marshal Ney exclaimed on seeing the battlefield, "What a massacre!" and without result.
Yeah.
Exact casualty figures are unknown, due to the chaos and conditions of the battle and the scale of loss. But it is likely that the Russians lost 20,000 men,
Wow.
killed, wounded or captured. The French, perhaps as many as 25,000.
Wow. Very brutal.
What is clear is that thousands of French veterans, the victors of Ulm, Austerlitz and Jena, met their end on the snowy fields of East Prussia.
Yep.
Napoleon's Grande Armée would go on to achieve many more great victories, including a crushing victory over Bennigsen's Russians at Friedland,
Oh yeah,
4
Friedland.
months later.
Yeah.
But after the brutal losses of Eylau, it was never the same.
You can see that, yeah. Wow, that was amazing. As always, Epic History TV is bringing us great historical details, especially on this Napoleonic series. Wow. Yeah, I mean, speechless almost. I mean, this was brutal. And I remember now it's Friedland that I reacted to before, which they mention Eylau, and the quote from Ney, I think. Yeah, but this was great. Alright, I'll see you in the next video. Bye.